I love Vim. I love Vim more than any other text editor out there. And the reason I fell in love with Vim is because of a program called SpaceVim, which is essentially a distribution of Vim aimed to add extensions and other functions to Vim that normally isn't there. So today, I'm going to walk you through how to install it, how to use it, and how to customize it to make it more your own. Let's get started. Okay, let's get started, and we're actually going to jump straight into the desktop. I'm running this in a VM because my SpaceVim is highly customized, and I wanted to give you the experience of what you'd see when you first install it. So to get started, what we need to do is head over to a web browser and go to the spacevim.org website. And here goes through everything you're going to need to be able to start using SpaceVim. There is documentation, quick start guide. You can even go in and support the community and development. There's even a quick little GitHub page to go and see the source code itself to kind of tweak with things as you want to. But for today, we're just going to do a quick install. So what you do, let me find it here. Run this in your terminal. So I'm going to sign that. Go into the terminal. Now normally, let me make this bigger and zoom in for those of you on mobile devices. It can be a little bit less than that. Sorry about that. So what we want to do is normally you wouldn't just curl any project whatsoever because this gives the program root access to your computer. But in this case, it's a trusted program, so it's not really going to cause you any harm. So on that, Git. I forgot to install Git. Give me 1 second. Okay, let's try this again now that I have Git installed on the computer. There we go. Now it's doing what it's supposed to do. It's only that one command. You shouldn't need to do anything else, and it installs everything that you need to get SpaceVim up and running. And there we go. And now all you have to do is load up Vim. I'm using NeoVim, which is kind of a different version of Vim. That's for a whole nother video. But all I have to do is launch either NVim for NeoVim or just Vim for regular Vim. Launch that, and then you have SpaceVim. Now you'll notice that there was that little error, the vimproc error. That may come up every once when you first install it and get it up and running. In fact, I'm going to do this again. Yes, close window, get that taken care of, NVim. Yes, okay. Sometimes this will happen. You will get this weird vimproc DLL was not found. Essentially, this is an extension that did not compile correctly. Okay, sorry about that, guys. Essentially, what happened was when I went in to try and correct that vimproc error, this is normally what you need to do. There we go. You go into here, you go into your terminal, cd into .spacevim bundle vimproc.vim. In here, there are a bunch of different files, and normally all you have to do is hit, if I can spell correctly, make, and then it should correct the problem. As I learned through the SpaceVim's official GitHub page, because other people were having a similar issue. The problem is, I don't know if it's the VM I'm running, whether it's a glitch with Mens, I don't know, but for whatever reason, it will not work for me. For you, it should work just fine. Just go into that directory, hit make, and the problem should go away. For now, we're just going to leave it because I'm not able to fix it, and I don't want to spend hours and hours trying to get this done when instead I want to show you SpaceVim, which is the whole point of me making this video. But just know that that's how you fix it if you run into that same problem if you install SpaceVim for the first time. But anyway, enough jibber jabber about things we cannot fix. Let's jump into SpaceVim and actually show you what it looks like by default. So this is SpaceVim, and it looks a little differently than what you're used to if you load Vim by default. I want to make that, there we go, thank you, make that error go away. looks a little differently than what you get with Vim out of the box. But essentially, here's what's going on. On the left-hand screen, you have a randomized welcome message. The way it looks and what it says will change every single time. So if I go in and I quit out of SpaceVim and I go back in, and then it'll look differently. So every single time it changes when you load into it, or even when you go into a file and go back to this Startify start screen, it will look differently. Then you have most recently used files in the current directory. In my case, that's the home directory. If you were doing stuff in documents and you vimmed into documents, the list will look differently here. And most recently used files in the entire system, so it doesn't matter what directory you're in, these files will always be populated. Now on the right hand side, you have Vimfiler, which is the essentially directory search or file finder within Vim itself. So you don't need to go through a terminal, cd, ls, and then Vim into. Everything is right here. Now to access it, actually first let me show you the spacebar, because the spacebar is what makes SpaceVim SpaceVim. So the spacebar is a quick, easy way to be able to access commonly used shortcuts and features within Vim. So for example, if I wanted to head over to Vimfiler and head over to this window, you see it's on window 2. All I'd have to do is hit space 2 to go to window 2, and not right here. Go to space 1 to go back to window 1. Really quick. Whoops. My bad. Really quick and easy way to be able to jump through various windows within Vim. Then you have a whole bunch of other settings, and if I showed you every single one of these, it would take an hour or two long. But the short and sweet of it is, you can easily access, do many different things with your files within SpaceVim by space F, and then you can save all the files you're working on, save the current file you're working on, so you don't have to constantly do the colon write or write and quit. You can just space TS or space F. Space FS, my bad. Space FS to save the current file you're working on. You can toggle the file tree, so see, you can get rid of it. Space FT brings it right back. Really quick and easy. The other thing I want to show you is the buffers, because that's actually pretty cool. What the buffer allows you to do is have multiple files open at the same time and just easily switch between them and even delete them right on the fly. Okay, so let me show an example, and the first thing we're going to do is actually show you the two different files that you need to be able to edit SpaceVim to your liking. So we're going to start off with the init.toml, which is in the spacevim.d/init.toml, and that's in your home directory. We go into there, and as you can see, we have all these settings. Now, what these do is set settings for SpaceVim itself, not Vim, just SpaceVim. So things like the color screen, GUI colors, the status line separator. If you have proper font, instead of having these lines, you can have arrow separator or even fire wave, I think is an example. There's a few of them in the official SpaceVim website under that documentation. It'll show you all the different examples of things you can choose. You can even set various other settings. Layers are things like autocomplete and for shell. So for example, hit space FT or space single quotes, you get a terminal, and by default that's actually set to the top, but I changed it to the bottom. I actually ran into a few issues and I had to make a new cut here, so I changed it to the bottom, but initially it's on the top. Now to exit out of this, make sure that you are in normal mode and then space BD. How did I do that? Well, what space BD does is delete the buffer you're currently on. So for example, here we're in init.toml, which is essentially the settings for SpaceVim. Okay, well, let's say I want to get out of here, but I don't want to delete the buffer. Space buffer H for the home screen. Then you're going to go into another file, and from here I think I'm going to show you this one. This is the this is the spacevim.vim file. No, this is not your vimrc file. This is yet another spacevim specific sort of settings, but this gives you far more customization than the default init.toml. So you can go and set relative line numbers, which is what spacevim uses by default. Essentially what that does is, instead of going through and saying, okay, I want to jump from this line to the relative number equals one line. Well, normally it would show 71, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on and so forth. You hit the number, so let's say 75 and then G, and then it would jump to line 75. Well, in this case, that doesn't work because we're using relative line numbers. So instead, you would say 8 down. It would jump down to that line because you saw it takes 8 lines from where you're currently at, up and or down. So 8 up, 8 down, 8 down, 8 up. Whoops, sorry, 8 up, 8 up. 1 down, overshot it. But that's essentially how that works. You can disable that by simply changing this to going to insert mode, changing that to 0. I'm going to leave it by default, but you can turn this off if you want to. This is also, and I'm going to show you another feature here, space S and then S, which greps on the fly within whatever file you're working on. So what I did was here. I added this myself, and you might want to do the same because you, within this file, would make specific settings for plugins that you might want to install and change, like color scheme for something. Maybe you need to change some other various setting, and the setting is a let G type of setting. It's not really a normal vimrc setting. This is where you would do that. Now, how do you actually install plugins? Well, let me show you, and let me show you by jumping over to that other buffer by hitting Alt left. Alt right will then take you to the other buffer. Jumping right through. Well, let's say we're done with this. Let's say we're done with this file and we want to get rid of it. How do we get rid of it? Space D, and then for buffer, D deletes the current buffer. It's gone. Now only have the init.toml buffer. You can have multiple buffers, delete certain ones, keep other ones, scroll between them really easily. So, how do you actually go about adding plugins? Well, it's actually quite simple. Go into here. We want to make a little comment here. Custom plugins. Hit enter. And from here, you use double brackets like you see with the layers. Custom underscore plugins. And then repo equals, and from here you would put in the repository of the plugin you want to add. So we're going to exit out of here real quick, go into the web browser, and we're going to use this as an example. We're going to find, let's see, spacevim dark. What is going to make this really easy? And we're going to install a color scheme. So copy the name of the, or URL rather, of the directory. Yes, close all tabs. Go back into Vim. Here, Control Shift. Actually, let me do that a little differently here. Let me do that a little differently. Double quotes, Control Shift V. Enter. Merge. Now this you want to actually set to 0. Essentially what merge means is, are the settings for this specific plugin going to merge with the settings you have for the spacevim.vim, and you actually probably don't want that because you want to be able to separately customize it without it getting bundled in with spacevim. So leave merge to 0. Then we're going to do a right quit and Vim. And right out of the gate, it installs it. Reload it, and it installs the plugin that you've installed. So, now that you've installed your plugin, and in this case, we did a color scheme, so we want to change the color scheme. And to do that, you go to your init.toml. Here, I'm going to do space Vim dark. There we go. Right quit again. And Vim. And as we can see, it's changed the color scheme to the one we set, in my case, Space Vim Dark, which is my preferred color scheme, is the one that I like the most, but you can download other specific plugins. And you know what I would do? If I were you, I would go in and space this out a little bit just to make it look a little nicer. It doesn't actually have to look that much. You don't have to do it that way, but this is the way I like to do it, just to make it look a little nicer. But this is how you would install a plugin. You could install different status lines. You could install other various plugins. This is how you do it. And if you want to make certain settings to the plugin, you would go over, like I showed you, to the spacevim.vim file. Find somewhere within this file. I chose line 1179 just because it was a nice space between regular settings and a giant block of code to throw in custom settings for custom plugins. You would go into there, and let me actually show you. And then from here you would say let G, and then, you know, blah 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 blah, whatever else. Save it, write it, and then you're good to go. So now that I've showed you how to install plugins and change some settings for the plugins, I'm now going to show you a third way to change settings for plugins and how to actually set Vim settings, because when I first started out with Space Vim, I had no idea how to set specific Vim settings, and by that I mean changing things like making sure that auto wrap goes on, removing the status line. Maybe I'd want to remove swap files, which essentially protect your files you're working on. So if you close out of Vim and don't purposefully quit out of it, it will create a swap file. When you go back into that file, you can choose to select the swap file that it created with the changes you've made, or you can delete it to go back to the original file you were working on before the swap file was created. So you can disable that if you want. However, I had absolutely no way knowing how to do it because sadly SpaceVim's documentation doesn't actually go through how to do it. So today I'm actually going to show you. So what you want to do, and I'm going to do this in the file manager just for ease of use, just because for my sanity, brain's not working well that well today. What you need to do is go into here and go into your spacevim.d, not your .spacevim. It has to be spacevim.d. Then you go in and you create a file, and we're going to call this auto. Again, if I can spell correctly, autoload. Within here, you want to create a new document, empty file, my config.vim. This is where you would go to change the various settings that you need to be able to actually set the things like I talked about. However, you're not quite done yet. There is a couple other things you're going to need to do. Okay, so what you need to do before you actually go in and start editing or making Vim specific settings is go back into SpaceVim, go into your init.toml, and you want to add this line. So what this is saying is that before SpaceVim actually loads its settings, it's going to load the file that we're about to edit the file that we just created. It's going to load that first, so any specific settings that we set will be made before SpaceVim loads. Now, go back into here, and we're going to actually go to that file. So spacevim.d, autoload myconfig.vim. Now we do need to add one thing here before we can actually go in and start making changes. Essentially, what this is saying is that anything within function and end function will load before SpaceVim loads. So we go in here, and we just do a quick here. So then let's do enter. Let's do a set, and actually we don't need the spaces. Okay. And then do a quick right. Then we're going to exit out of SpaceVim. Now what the sign column does, what that setting does, and the reason I chose it, is it should actually make a noticeable difference, and you should be able to see what we've actually done. Okay, sorry about that. I actually realized that I spelled sign wrong because I can't spell or anything today. So we're going to go back into there. We're going to go into 0. There we go. Okay, so what sign column does is it adds an extra little space between the number lines and the end of the actual program. The reason for that is if you have error correcting applied with like Conquer of Code, Syntactic, or LSP, which I'll make another video on in the future, this gives you a little extra room so you can see those individual errors with like exclamation marks, red marks, or whatever for a line you've made an issue with. So this is where you go and you set all those settings. Just make sure that you put in the function myconfig after abort and end function in the myconfig.vim. Then within the toml, make sure, make sure we're gonna highlight this, bootstrap after myconfig after. This will not work if that's not applied, so make sure you've done that and you've made the necessary changes within the myconfig.vim so that it actually works properly. So that is just a kind of really quick rundown of what SpaceVim is and how it works. It's a really good starting point for those of you who haven't used SpaceVim before, or haven't used Vim before rather, and are kind of intimidated when you first use it. And in fact, let me show you here. I'm going to purposefully break this config file, and then we're going to write it and exit out. Also, this is a VM, so I don't really care if I break them. And launch it again. We know it's error. This is normally how Vim launches, whether it's NeoVim or regular Vim. This is what it looks like. And normally, it can be a little intimidating. There's not a lot going on. You have a very basic status line that only shows you if you're in insert mode. It might, it does show visual line and line mode, but other than that, it doesn't do very much. There's no easy way to be able to access files. It can be a bit intimidating. So what SpaceVim aims to do is make that process at least a little bit easier. And let me go back in here real quick and fix that right up. There we go. Save, go back in, and then we should be able to jump right back into NVim, no problem, F11, perfect. So it's really nice, a really great way to be able to get started. You can build it up from here and really make it your own and really change a lot of the settings, change a lot of its behaviors. You can add extensions, remove extensions. There's a whole lot you can do, and what I want to do really quickly is show you my custom SpaceVim to kind of give you an idea of what it could actually look like once you've actually customized it. And I might actually go in and make more videos about it in the future to show in detail some of the extensions that I've added and how they actually work. Okay, so now let me quickly come in and show you what my custom SpaceVim actually looks like. So as you can see, the Vim filer isn't there anymore because I use NerdTree, and I actually have it set up to load up on the left side of the screen instead of the right. You change that, I believe, in the auto load. Let me see. Actually, bookmark real quick the spacevim.vim file. You can change which side of the screen your file manager actually opens up in. So this is NerdTree. I like it mainly, and this I'm really serious here, because you can actually set bookmarks for specific files. You can do this for lines within files as well, but it's just a nice, easy way to be able to jump into a file you work on frequently that's not on the list of most recently used files. to access a whole slew of files that I've worked on in the past. I have what's an extension called Clap, and this will bring up, this can do a couple of things. First off, it is a file finder, so you can just search for files like you normally would, but it can also list out I forget how many, I think 25 or 50 most recent files, and it even shows a preview of each file that you've worked in. So I actually find that quite useful. You can go into here, and there we go. We can see here, this is the actual file finder, and I'll have to fix that later. Anyway, so essentially what this can do is you can search for files on the fly. So we can do .config, and then let's see or actually, no, we don't need anything, we just need kitty. I can go into kitty and kitty.conf, and now I'm in my kitty config terminal. So this is just a nice way to be able to easily access and monitor files. Sorry about that. I actually had to get rid of that message. That was really bugging me. So you will see that I've also changed the status line from the standard kind of grayed out status line to, I forget what it's called. Actually, let me show you the init.toml to airline. That's what it's called. So Vim airline. It's a nicer looking status line in my opinion, and I really like it because when you go in to do something like insert, the whole status line's color changes. You go back into normal, changes again. V-line, it changes. If you go into, I believe it's V replace, which you get to by hitting G capital R, it changes color yet again. It's just a nice, simple status line that shows you a lot of useful information. And you can also change the various themes of the status line, but I'll get into the more details about that in a future video. But as you can see, I have a whole slew of plugins that I've installed. COC, which is a Code of Conquer, is a error checking and auto suggest plugin that works like Visual Studio Code. So you can go in, you screw something up, it can correct it for you. Sneak is really nice because you can go in and invoke it with S, and then by typing in 2 characters, so we're going to do PL, it will automatically jump to those to the characters you put in, semicolon to jump through them. It's a nice way just to be able to easily go through and navigate whatever file you want. I have a few themes installed. The only one I really actually end up using is Space from Dark. So that's just me. Clap, I've already kind of showed you how that works. Cheat Sheet, it's a fantastic plugin, but a video for another day. I've also had to go in and actually disable the status line, and if you go in and you want to add a status line of your own, you're going to need to add this to your init.toml in order for it to work properly. I've also gone in and have to disable a few plugins because of Conquer of Code, but hey, I don't really mind. Here, and let me show you one other thing real quick. Let me find, I don't want my config, I want this. Yes, space FT. Settings, 4 custom plugins. Thank you. Okay, perfect. So, nope. Settings, 4 custom plugins. Okay. This is what I'm talking about. So you go in and you set very specific settings for various plugins. So Space Vim Leader for airline, you can do stuff for COC. Vim Rainbow, which that plugin makes a lot of the signs like the equal sign and a few other things colorized. It also makes, let me show you here, if you have multiple, insert mode please, multiple brackets, it will change the color of the brackets. So as you can see here, you have blue on the outside and purple on the inside. Not really necessary all that much, it's just nice to have. I've changed other settings here for Conquer of Code, and then that's it. That's where everything actually ends. But this is where you would go to set specific extension settings. Now, let me actually quit out of this real quick, jump back in, because I don't want to change any of the settings that I've made, and let me show you my custom config file here so you can see what a more complete one looks like. So I have no backup. I used to have no swap file, but I actually kind of like the swap file, so I'm gonna keep that there. It's really helpful, and I can talk about those in detail in another video. I have a few custom key bindings, and I'm sure some of you are going to look at these key bindings and be pissed off about it, for those of you who use Vim on a regular basis. But for me, these are the key bindings that work best. These are the key bindings for Sneak. I also have a auto command. What this does is it goes in and it removes any white space that you may have in your document. So let's say I went in and I did a whole lot of spacing and I did exit and then I quit out of the document and saved it. What this will do is automatically remove all that extra white space just to make for cleaner looking code. I'm not a programmer though, so I don't really utilize that as much as other people would, but it's still a nice thing to have. I've also gone in here and set more settings for Conqueror of Code. There's a lot going on with that extension. Again, a whole nother video. But this is essentially, oh yes I do. Thank you. Right, space PD, there we go. That is essentially my Space Vim config. There's a lot going on with it, and I'd love to talk about it more in detail in future videos. But for now, I'll kind of just leave it at that. And yeah. And that was Space Vim. Now, I'll be honest with you, it's not perfect. It's a fantastic way for new Vim users to get started, to get an idea of certain plugins, to add new plugins, change settings for plugins. However, having to deal with 3 different files to be able to make various changes within Vim and Space Vim, it's a little much, I'll be honest with you. But if you figure it out, if you customize it enough, you can really change it and make it your own, like I showed you earlier. Now, I will leave in the link in the description the URL to the Space Vim website, so you can just go to that real quickly. The GitHub issue for that Vimproc issue we ran into in the very beginning, I'll leave a link in the description for that specific issue, so you can run through how to fix that. And I will also have my .spacevim and .spacevim.d up in my GitLab repository under my config file. So you can go and check that out. You can take those, replace them with the ones you have on your computer, do whatever you want with it, but I want to just provide that for you if you want to use them. And that's pretty much it. I really have fallen in love with them ever since I started using Space Vim, and I honestly don't see going back to any other text editor anytime soon. And yeah, that's it. Hope you guys have a great day. See ya.